Alright, so in this video we're checking out the FLYWOO Firefly 1S Nano Baby. This is the V3 now. It's the third generation and featuring the DJI O4 air unit, so also referred to as the O4 Lite. And before you were wondering about whether or not I'm going to be covering the new wide angle adapter, I'm going to talk about it very briefly in this video. I'm going to have a whole dedicated video on this adapter because there's like 3 of them. It's a little confusing as to what works with what, and yeah, I'm gonna have to get into that all in a separate video with all the pros and the cons, and get a deep dive into that. Because it's a very important product and it deserves its own video. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section down below and I'll try and answer them for that video. But if you want the short answer, I think it's a overall worth getting if you are looking for the wide angle ability, and if you can't fly the narrow field of view on the stock camera, then yeah, I would say it's probably worth getting it. Now, I'll get into all the downsides in that main video. In this video, I'm going to mainly talk about the quad and its flying characteristics. They also sent me their new chargers. So I got the Easy Power E16 and the other one is the E24. They're for their 1S and 2S batteries. I'm going to have a separate video on that as well. That's actually, well, that does actually storage charging, which is I think why it deserves a separate video. I'll talk about that, how that works in that video. So that'll be separate as well. So in this video, we'll just talk about the quad. There's in the new V3 third generation of the Nano Baby, they do again have the analog, walk snail, and HD0 versions, which are all lighter as far as I know compared to the O4 version. So if you want more freestyle ability, just more, just in general, more agility, aggressive flying, if that's more what you were looking for, then obviously you want to go lighter and go for one of those other versions. The O4 version here is mainly for 4K video. Yes, you can get into some freestyle. I'll talk about how and what situations that would be applicable. But in general, the lighter analog version, for example, is going to perform better in freestyle compared to this one. Also, in this new version 3 generation, this is the Firefly 18, and the other version is the Firefly 16. So previously they only had the 16 or the 1.6 inch versions of these, which is the 40mm propeller. Now they have the 1.8 inch version, or the 18, which is a 45mm propeller. In this case, they have the HQ bi-bladed. And if for those of you wondering already, I would probably go with the tri-bladed props if you want to do more freestyle. We'll talk about that again a little later in the video. So the advantage of going to the slightly larger frame, this is new for the version 3 generation, is you're going to get a little bit more power, so a little bit more agility and performance, and a little bit more flight time compared to the 40mm propeller versions of the smaller. Basically, it's the same motor, a little bit different KV. But yeah, I would recommend going with the 18 versus 16 unless you just want to get the smaller version, because you are still carrying around that extra weight of the O4 camera and all this other stuff here. That's all the same, just you're on a smaller prop, so you just get shorter flight times and less performance for the battery. All right, so you get the quad, you get the same sort of style of prop guards that you got before. So I think these are unchanged. If you're wondering if they're any different, I don't think they're any different. And then in the box, you get the wiring diagram for the flight controller. It is a slightly newer generation, F405, for the HD system, and it has a built-in Express LRS receiver on here. And you also get a bunch of stickers as well, standard stuff, and then get a bag of accessories, a right-angled USB-C connector for probably, I didn't need to use it, but you may need to use it for the O4 USB-C port there to get the files off. Get some tape there, zip ties, screwdriver, a bunch of spare screws and nuts, and a prop removal tool, and then you get 2 sets of these HQ bi-bladed 45mm propellers. There's a spare set here, and then I already put these on the quad. So they were 8 in the bag here, and it came from the factory without the props on there, so I put the props on. And then it did come with this ND filter, and I'll explain why this looks so different compared to what's on here. The general out of the box option does not include the wide angle adapter. You do have to buy that separately, and in this case it's just a friction fit. It just literally just slides right off like this, and this is what it looks like. There's obviously a lens element in there that converts the narrow field of view to a wide angle field of view, and then you have basically a UV filter glass in the front here to protect the lens in the back. And I don't know if it's glass or plastic in there in terms of that lens. Probably plastic, but I'm not 100% sure. The quads can come like this. This is their standard 18mm mounting adapter for the 04 air unit camera that allows you to screw it in the side there and adjust the angle. But while you can adjust the angle when it's like this, and then you would use this ND filter on that particular mount. So you can see the little mount point there. You kind of pop it on and twist it to lock it into place. That's what this is for. If you're okay with the standard narrow field of view, then you can just go with that. But if you want to get the wide angle field of view, then you're going to get this adapter, and that's going to fit this particular camera module. This is the 18mm mount. They have 2 other versions of this. It's also very confusing, and I'll get into why in that video, but there's an 03 version and an 04 Pro version. And basically it takes the 04 Lite camera and turns it into mountable, or it turns it into the form where you can mount it in a 04 Pro mount or an 03 mount. And I will talk about that in that video. It is a little confusing, but yeah, that basically it just goes on like so. And so if you buy the standard version, you don't get this. You have to buy this separately. I think it's $30 for this. And then you get the ND filters as well, which I would recommend, because then you can turn on manual camera settings. But for this video, I just left everything stock. So yeah, anyway, let me bring up the product page so I can show some specs. All right, so just run over the specs here. F45 flight controller, ICM gyro, 8 megabytes of black box data. So this is a newer version of this flight controller. There were some previous differences from the older versions. I don't know exactly what all the differences are. I just know this is a newer version, and it has a white PCB. I think the previous one had a black PCB. So the motor on the 18, which is what I have, is the 1002 motor at 19,800 kV. I think the previous generations had the 23,500 kV motor, which is for the Firefly 16. And again, the props for the 16 and 18, 40mm and 45mm. And then on the 16, you're going to get a tri-bladed HQ 40mm propeller. Recommended batteries are the 450, 750, and 1000. And I actually have them here. I'll show you those here in a second. They do have the A30 connector, which is compatible with BT 2.0. And then here are the flight times for the 16 and the 18 for the different batteries. Yeah, it looks like they only have the flight times for the 450 and the 750 for each of these. Now for me, on the 450, they're saying here, they're advertising 4 minutes and 17 seconds and 5 minutes and 40 seconds on the 750. So for me, I got 3.5 minutes on the 450, and I got on the 750, I got 5.5 minutes, and on the 1000, I got about 8 minutes. And I'll talk about the massive differences between the batteries a little later in the video. So I believe out of the box, you're going to get 2 of the battery holders, which are, again, you can twist these off and replace them. The one I have in here, yeah, I think it's the 1S, yeah, the 750. And then this one here is the 450, so they're slightly different sizes. Basically, you pop them in and you twist them, and then it'll lock into place. They did send me an extra one. This is the 1S1000, and they're a very tight fit. So probably the easiest way to get them in here is put the battery connector in through this way first, and then it'll slide in and then you can connect it in the back like that. That's what I've been doing. This is actually the 450, and that slides in very nice into the 750. It is not, I don't know, it's a bit of a hassle getting the batteries in, and like I think getting them in this way is easiest because it is, as you can see, it is narrower here at the top where the battery connector is. So that's what I would recommend. But yeah, it is somewhat tough twisting these off because it's a very tight fit because you don't want these popping off in flight, but you can switch these out. For me, I think here's the deal with the batteries. Let's just get into it right now. So the 450 is the lightest. It's going to give you the most performance. If you're primarily interested in freestyle, this is the one to go for. And while I got 3.5 minutes, if you're going to be doing a lot of aggressive flying with freestyle, you're going to get probably closer to 2.5, maybe less, 2 to 2.5 minutes of really aggressive flying on the 450 because you're carrying around a lot of weight. The 750 can afford you a little bit more flight time, but at the expense of basically sacrificing agility and performance. You can still do a few tricks, but nothing really that aggressive. But you're going to get a lot more flight time on the 750. This is the one I'm going to be sticking with. That's why the 750 is on there, because I'm going to be flying this one primarily. It gives a good balance of performance and flight time. I don't really need to do crazy, matty flips with this guy, so the 750 is fine for me. Now the 1000, much bigger and heavier, and I'll show you the weights here on the scale here in a second. The most flight time, I got 8 minutes of flight time, just cruising around, but you can't really do much in terms of acrobacy or freestyle. It's like trying to fly a large tank. It's and it's also not very responsive because you're pushing around a lot of weight. So this is primarily just for people that are seeking the most possible flight time and they don't care about anything else. And then if that's what you're looking for, then go for the 1000. So you have a lot of options. There's an option for pretty much every pilot on this model, and they have the swappable battery tray. So you should be good to go depending on what you're looking for. All right, so here's the weight here. No battery. This is with the lens adapter, the wide angle adapter, so it's 39.29. But this thing here weighs 3.67 grams. And then we'll just take that. Without it, it's 35.66 grams. And then I'll show you the weights of the batteries by themselves. So the 450 is 12.7. And then together with the quad, it's 48.38. Take that off. The 750 by itself is 17. And then with the quad, it's 52.6. And then the 1000 is 21.9. Wow. And then with the quad, we're pushing 57 and 57.54. And yes, I did have the wide angle adapter off of there, so make sure you add back in the 3.66 grams if you're wondering what the weights are with this included. All right, so talking about the build of this particular model, it's not much changed in terms of where it was before. And I think that you only have the standard X style frame now instead of the there was previously a dead cat version. I don't think that exists anymore. They do have these little bumper guards now, these little 3D prints here on the ends. I don't know how they're secured. So this looks like they're just popped on the end here. So if they're not glued on, they might come off in a crash. And again, these are the same 1002 motors. These motors now have plugs on this flight controller. Previously, in the V1, V2 generation of this Firefly model, the motors were soldered on. So this does add a little bit more weight. So something to keep in mind. Micro USB on the flight controller. And now, if you saw my original DJI 04 review video, you'll remember that I had the Firefly, one of these, it was the V2 version with that 1S board, and you remember that the voltage would cut off at like 3.2 volts, and then you would just lose video and just crash. So they haven't put in that BEC into the board on this new generation of this flight controller. You can see it's there. It's got that white PCB They got the plugs now. Same Express LRS receiver on board. It's a serial Express LRS receiver, but now they have this a BEC that's separate right here, and it's a little hard to see, but you can buy it by itself for like, I think it's like $5 or $6. So if you have the version 2 of the baby Nano, and with that older 1S board, you could, in theory, just buy the BEC and upgrade it to 04 with the proper BEC. This goes out to 2.6 volts, I believe, and which is what you want, because the battery will be dead by like 2.9 volts, and that way you don't lose video. It'll still provide video all the way to the end of the battery versus where it just cuts off at like 3.2 volts without this BEC. But the downside is that it's a separate part. They kind of have it on here zip tied, there's some heat shrink around it, and then there's the battery connector comes out the side there. So pros and cons. It does add more weight, so the overall weight, as you know, this is quite a bit more for this 1002 motor, which, you know, it just cuts into your flight time and your performance ability. Now, I think they've gone a little slightly different way in terms of their philosophy in building, in terms of the canopy and trying to prevent jello from getting into the 04 camera. So I think in previous builds, there's a screw here that you can see that's like it's got a little flathead screw there, and I think this is like countersunk. And there was a nut that was over here that would hold that screw in place, but you can see here that that nut's not there anymore. So you can, if you press down on this, see that the screw actually comes out. And of course that's because of these gummies here, these little rubber spacers that are providing vibration dampening, and this whole thing can move. So let's see if I can show this. This is gonna be a little tricky to show here, but I'll grab the side here, I'll grab the frame, and then you can see that you can actually twist the whole top here. This whole thing this is how the vibration dampening works, so that you don't get a lot of jello in the 04 footage, and that's because this screw here is not fixed to the plate, to the frame. That allows a little bit of freedom of movement here, and that prevents a lot of the vibration from getting into the footage. Now, I did look at the footage; it seems okay. I didn't really see a whole lot of jello. I'll put links to all of the flight footage down in the description. You guys can examine it thoroughly, and if you see any jello that I missed, let me know. But I think this is working in terms of jello management, and I think also has to do with the fact that you have a lot of extra weight here with this little lens adapter. Having extra mass will dampen those high frequency vibrations. So, you know, that's I think pretty good in terms of how they have designed this in terms of getting good 4K footage out of this. A couple things to note before I end the video. The footage is in 16:9 format with Rocksteady turned on, so no gyro flow in any of the footage. And I think this is by design because of this lens element here and the way it does its transformation of the narrow angle to the wide angle view. I'm gonna get into that more in the video on this wide angle adapter, because I did not test this in the 4:3 mode. Even in the 16:9 mode, you can still see these props in the goggle footage. So again, I'll link all this footage down in the video description. Can't put everything into this video because it would be like, it would probably be an hour long. This video is way long as it is. So if they want to see specific details on those flights and the props in view with the goggle footage, you can go ahead and examine the footage. But once Rocksteady has stabilized this footage, which crops in the view a little bit, the props disappear even at this angle here. But the thing is, like, because this is so tight, I can't really adjust the angle much. Something again, I'll talk about that in the video on the wide angle adapter. But overall, the performance on this isn't really that much different from the V2, other than the fact that we have a bigger prop, slightly different KV motor, so you get a little bit more flight time and a little bit more power. But otherwise, you know, that extra power is kind of gobbled up by the extra weight of the 04 air unit, so it's kind of a trade-off. That's why, to me, it feels about the same. Anyway, overall, that's pretty much it in terms of my thoughts on this model. Got any questions, comments, let me know in the comment section below. I'll go ahead and I'll just give you my narrated flight here at the end, and as a separate video, but all the extra flight footage will be, including the DVR goggle footage, will be at the in the video description, as always. And I will have those other two videos on the wide angle adapter and the chargers separately. So stay tuned, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss those videos, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one.